And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you doing?
Very well, Brian. Had a nice ride yesterday. We had some weird weather here in
Hmm.
Sacramento. It was. I felt like I was the Wicked Witch of the West on the bicycle because there was hot wind, there was cold wind, there was like 5 raindrops, and there were these weird sort of swirling leaf windy things. It was very odd. So anyway, it was a lovely day though, right here in Sacramento. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Our weather's been fantastic. I mean, we've hit this nice, everything's been dry and comfortable and
Nice.
low to mid 70s. It's sort of like, okay, we're waiting for the shoe to fall. We're just
It will
waiting for
happen.
that. Exactly DC? It's going to heat back up to 95 degrees. It's just a matter of time. So we're enjoying it while we can. So, yeah, but
Nice.
this weekend, I'm not going to be here in DC. You and I are going to
You're
be in Southern
not.
California.
We are at Blue Moon Pilates. We're so looking forward to it. It's been something we've been dreaming about for a while, getting out of the road and doing some live moving conversations, live events. And this is our very first one. So we're super excited.
Yeah, and the first day, which is sort of one of my specialties that I love talking about, is going to be on low back pain. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But what does day 2 have in store for us on Sunday?
Day two, we're going to talk about the shoulder,
Mhm.
stability, mobility, and balance, because I find the shoulder is always a source of questions for almost
Oh,
every
yeah.
student I've ever worked with, because it's just such a confusing area and things are so complicated. And the sort of sometimes I call it the polka or the country dance, and one muscle and then the other muscle contributing to it, and then another one contributing to it, and these two add extension, these two make flexion. It's all quite confusing, or can be. So I
Yep.
can hope to make that clearer for you. And then in the afternoon, we'll talk about Pilates and osteoporosis. So a topic we've covered on this podcast and will continue to cover, because it is an ongoing topic, and it is in I would say Pilates and movement and osteo are still being worked out, like how to
Oh,
best
yeah.
work with it and that kind of thing. So we'll come and give you what we understand is the latest information on that. And
And what
yeah,
but the neat thing about that is it's the practical application of it.
yes,
Because
yes,
it's one thing to
exactly.
hear what you're supposed to do, but it's another thing to experience it in your own body. I mean, you and I have said this so many times. We are kinetic learners. We like to experience things through our own body. And when we do own it in our body, it's so much easier for us to translate that to our clients and get them to feel what we feel. So to have this opportunity to be there live and in person going over these exercises is a lot easier and a lot better than just doing it through YouTube or through Instagram, which is sort of the only method that we have, being on 2 different coasts. So this is a great opportunity. And if you guys are interested in any of those topics, then I can't recommend this enough. And again, you got one more week. It is Tuesday right now. If you're listening to this when it drops, it's Tuesday. It's coming up this weekend. It's going to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it's at Blue Moon Pilates. And the first day, that Saturday, is going to be all about low back pain. And you and I were sort of discussing what we should talk about today. Now, let's face it, low back pain, we've talked about a lot on the podcast in the past. And I just went through this specific topic teaching in Florida 3 weeks ago or whatever it's been, is something that we should cover today. And we're going to cover in a lot more detail to a practical extent on that first day of low back pain. And it's all about lumbopelvic position, lumbopelvic control, what is neutral, is there such a thing as neutral spine, all of these things. It's such a hot topic, but it's so important to understand that I think today's a good opportunity to sort of launch into that a little bit and preview a little bit of what we're going to be talking about this coming Saturday.
Woohoo! Now, this is also part of our controversies series. We've done a
Oh, big
few,
time.
right? IT band, and there's a few other things that were, mildly controversial. Lumbopelvic positioning is always a hot topic in any group of teachers that I've ever worked with. Um, Beliefs about it, ideas about it, I would say dogma about what's correct and
Mhm.
not correct, all inform how we hold our bodies when we move and how we perform exercises, particularly in
Yep.
Pilates. And again, Brian and I, remember, we come from a medical exercise specialist background. We come from working with clients with injuries a lot. So our understanding of neutral may be different than what you're used to hearing.
Mhm.
because we basically, like for us, it's a neutral range
Yes.
that can really go from fully flexed to fully extended and somewhere in between, depending on what that client needs for optimum function and optimum comfort and optimum pain relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
And that's
really
the
want to
thing that
bring
most
that up.
people, yeah, whenever I talk about this, depending on the age of the instructor, what their experience level is, what they've been taught, because if I'm at a fitness conference versus a Pilates conference
Mhm.
versus just at someone's studio, everybody sort of has their own thought of what is neutral spine. Because we ask, what is neutral spine? And you get a lot of different definitions. And I love what you just said. To me, it's a spectrum. It's really, there's no hard and fast, it is exactly this. It might be in one book, but you read another book and it might be described a little differently. And another book, it might be described a little differently. But for the person in front of you, that's all that matters is what their spine needs.
Exactly. So many people either take this as what their teacher told them, or they
Yes.
take this is what works for me and therefore works for everybody. Neither of those things are necessarily true. Just, I know I've got to break this open a little bit.
That's
I've
true.
had more than one person come up to me, many times, and really just this is a very confusing topic.
Mhm.
So we want to start in on this, and I actually want to start with a little bit of history. It's a history moment, people. So the whole idea of neutral spine came from Punjabi, basically a biomechanist and a spinal surgeon, and I believe he also did like prosthetics and that kind of thing. So basically, the idea there was how does the spine work? Spinal biomechanics. How does the spine
Mhm.
work? And the whole idea of a neutral spine came from this idea that when you are in a relatively neutral position, and you can, like if you're sitting and you're on both your sit bones, you're kind of sitting up right now, you're in a neutral position. What's interesting about that, and one of the things that came up about that was you are not necessarily in that moment supported by the ligamentous or the joint structure of the vertebra. Okay, so when you are basically just in neutral, that means the spine has the most potential to move in any direction,
Mhm.
but it's not necessarily being held in that position except by our myofascial system. Okay, so let's take a moment. And part of that, part of the idea with that was when you move out of that neutral zone, you can often move in a certain amount, a certain number of ranges, forward and back, side to side in rotation, without causing any discomfort or pain or injury or damage, right? We all have ranges of motion that we move in quite comfortably. And then there are the ranges that cause trouble, either wear and tear on the joints, compression on the spine, wear on the discs, or other kinds of situations. And basically, that's why the lumbopelvic neutral is a zone or a region or a range, not a specific position. So I want to really
Mhm.
start with that as a concept.
And the thing is that I always want to remind people is our spines were never meant to be static.
Right.
So as soon as you add movement to it in any way, shape, or form, that neutral is going to adjust a little bit here or there because our hips don't stay in place, our shoulders don't stay in place. Things are going to move and they're going to take our spine slightly out of position. So you want to be in the position that is best for your spine for the given movement that we're asking the spine to do.
And that's critical right there. So, what is the neutral for the movement you're trying to do? What is the best position? And in our world, sometimes the most pain free position
Right.
for the client for that movement, right?
Yep.
So, that's how we want to talk about neutral is how do you find the range for a client that works? How do you find the range for yourself that's optimum? Because being too flexed has disadvantages, being too extended has
Mhm.
disadvantages. Sort of being asymmetrically, curved have disadvantages in terms of how all the muscles and everything else work.
Mhm. And breaking that down even to another extent, not only for movement, but also for ethnicity, because you and I have worked in Asia, as well as so a Caucasian spine and an Asian spine are going to be much different. So it's really about trying to find what works best for the person in front of you. And for you and I, our neutrals are going to be much different based on not only the conditions that we have in our backs, but we're just different people. We hold our weight differently. We've done things differently through our whole lives. So because of all of these things, our spines are completely different and should be treated as such. And nobody's going to come and be a cookie cutter and say everybody has to be like this, because not everybody can fit into that mold.
And this gets to, I want to speak specifically to Pilates teacher training, which I have been a major part of for many years. And that is this idea of even understanding what neutral could be, or how do you identify it in a body. There's a lot of and I've been part of that. There's a lot of like, this is what neutral is when you're moving. This is what neutral is when you're supine about to do a mat class. This is what neutral is when you're seated and you're about to do something else seated. This is what neutral is when you're in a squat, for example, right? So neutral is different in all those different positions. And one of the things, though, to Brian's point, is that it changes. It gets supported in different ways. It moves in different ranges to support whatever movement we're trying to do. So again, there's kind of like, here's one very tiny definition of what neutral might be, and that might be, ASIC pubic bone or on a plane perpendicular to the ground. It may be that you've got equal work through the front and the back of the spine sandwich, if you will, the abdominals and the low back. Those may be even, there may be other ways to think about that. But really, ultimately, it's like, what works best for your body? What creates movement that moves smoothly from the legs through the pelvis, through the spine, through the upper body, and back the other way without causing pain and discomfort, and without causing wear and tear ultimately either.
That's the other key, is what doesn't cause as much wear and tear, because we want to put that spine in the best mechanical advantage for whatever movement we're going to be doing. So if you have someone who's playing golf, for instance, they need to make sure that that spine rotates in certain areas, is stable in other areas, can extend at a certain part of the rotation or a certain part of the swing, flex at another part of the swing. So we want to take a look at where their spine is at all of these movements and put it at the most mechanically advantaged or position for them that doesn't cause them as much stress. And again, that's just for a golfer, for someone who does a different thing, for someone who is a Pilates student, for someone who is a dancer, for someone who, I don't know, plays pickleball or tennis or whatever, or just a grandmother picking up their grandchild out of the crib or putting him in the car. We need to make sure that we're putting them in positions that are going to keep their spine safe and healthy, and then train them at those positions so that they can do those activities of daily life or whatever sport they choose to do safely, efficiently, with less pain or hopefully no pain.
So I have two case studies. I'm going to start with one, and then we'll see where we go from there. One of them was a client of mine a long time ago, who had pretty chronic, like low back sacroiliac joint discomfort. And what she always said was, when she stood for too long, and she ran a company, she ran a private company. So she was at a lot of parties and a lot of events and a lot of things. So she did a lot of standing around talking to people. And she said her back would start to hurt and her back of her hips would start to hurt after about 10 to 15 minutes. But she would just put up with it because that's what you have to do, or she'd find a way to sit or whatever. She'd accommodate it. And in looking at her posture, her habitual posture was very posteriorly tilted. Right, her bottom of her pelvis was shifted forward, the top of her pelvis was shifted back. She kind of slung her hips under, and her low back was very straight in that position. It was relatively flexed. And in looking at that, it was like, okay, so that's her chronic or habitual standing posture. She has trouble standing, so I'm thinking through some clinical reasoning here. What if we change the forces that go through that low spine and those sacroiliac joints? Okay, well, if standing is the problem, we need to change the forces going through that in standing. So I basically said, this was one of those moments of keep it simple, stupid. This is one of those moments like, stick your butt out when you're standing. Basically, just think about shifting your weight towards your feet, toward the front of your feet, not towards your heels. Stick your tailbone out a little bit more, and just find a different position to hang out in when you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave her that little piece of advice, hoping it would do something. You never know. She was at a party, I think the next day or the day after, and she came back in for our next session. She said, I could stand for 45 minutes.
That's huge.
So, right, and that's dramatic, guys. Not all, not everything is that successful, but it was a really good reminder to me of, number one, what is the exact problem they're having? In her case, it was standing. What
Mm-hmm.
is a potential reason for that? In her case, it was this posterior tilt she hung out in, and this kind of slung under posture she hung out in, and then give a cue that was very simple. One thing:
Mm-hmm.
stick your butt out, right? Just like arch your back a little bit more when you stand. And that, in her case, changed the forces going through that area to decrease the discomfort. So that was
Yeah.
that was a win for me, and a really good lesson all the way around.
I love the fact that you said sort of keep it simple, stupid. How many times have I mentioned to a client who needs to be a little bit more flexed, for instance, just a little softening of the spine. They just have a little too much lordosis, but they stand locking their knees. And all you have to say is
Right.
unlock your knees,
Right.
soften that. And as soon as they do that, it just again, it takes that pressure off. Just a millimeter or two sometimes is all it needs. But all of a sudden they say, "Oh wow, yeah, that does feel a little bit better." So you say when you feel like your back is starting to bother you, ask yourself, are you locking out your knees? And it takes a little while. Don't get me wrong. It's not something you can immediately change. It's a habit. It's really tough. But over time, suddenly they say, oh, yeah, I feel so much more comfortable now. And all I did was soften my knees. So sometimes keeping it that simple can make a huge difference on a person.
I mean, I think if you really are honest with yourself, it's easiest for you to make a correction when you have one thing to say to yourself.
Mhm.
Turn right
Oh,
at the
yeah.
light, right? Not turn right, but not if there's something here and like suddenly, and it's the body gets confused very easily. It
Mhm.
likes simple directives: move this way, do this, and especially when it can organize the whole posture, because like softening the knees is going to organize everything from the feet to the head, or sticking your
Mhm.
tail out was going to organize everything all the way up.
Yep.
So those are just really, again, important in any case and in any kind of cueing that you're doing, but particularly when you're looking at a postural pattern that you're trying to change for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's important to keep it to that one. I call it one swing thought because in golf, you never
Mhm.
want to give them 20 things to think about. They'll never hit the ball. So you
Right.
give them one. And it's that way with pretty much all the cueing I give, one at a time. If you're if you're one of these people who chronically, excuse me, say over and over, do this, da, 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 you don't give their brain a chance to process that information. So
Right.
it is important to give them that one thing to do. And when it comes to postural awareness, it can be something as simple as open the collarbones a little bit more, soften the tailbone, or stick out the tailbone a little bit more. Something very small that they can do on a regular basis and remind themselves of it, and it makes a huge difference in their lives, or it can
Yeah,
potentially.
absolutely. So when we think about this, Brian and I often again think about this in terms of different pathologies that we commonly deal with.
Mhm.
And I want to bring up another person I've been thinking about lately, which is a number of my clients have had structurally a rather severe lordosis. So that's just their spine is just very deeply curved.
Mhm.
And in the Pilates environment, there is a value on things like a roll down, on articulating the spine in flexion. That is a value in Pilates. And for both of these clients, one is a client, one is actually an instructor and a client. Um, Over time, I realized that was not serving them. That in fact, I'm not the only one. Many people who have a relatively lordotic lumbar spine, one that really shouldn't go into a huge amount of flexion, if you keep working on flexion, you will often end up creating some disc discomfort, some
Mhm.
sacroiliac joint issues and disruptions, because that's not really how that structure wants to work. So with both of these clients, I worked not on creating, I mean, I wouldn't say that. For both of them, I worked gently on getting more mobility in flexion for both of them. But I realized in both circumstances that that spine was never going to get to like flat on the mat without really a lot of extreme motion in the spine and in the pelvis, right?
Mhm.
Without like a massive posterior tilt, bottom of the pelvis like up toward the ceiling, and that low back smashing down towards the mat, and oftentimes a lot of gluteal engagement. They were not going to get there. So
Yeah.
for these clients, and for clients like this, even just clients who have a big butt or big lordotic curve, that's where I use, what I call supported neutral, putting something underneath the back that brings the floor up to the spine. So it
Mhm.
supports the spine. And then if they're doing something like a roll down, they come down, they come in contact with the support, whatever it is, towels or sticky mats or roll, whatever it is. And then they come back, continue to roll down without maintaining that flexion or going into more flexion. So it's kind of like finding in that roll down, still they're flexing from where they usually live, but they're not going into like full flat on the mat flexion. So they're getting the mobility within the range of their neutral is kind of my goal with that. Right. And
And that can be huge.
it makes a huge difference. It's really decreased a lot of pain for a lot of clients.
Yeah. And doing something like that also gives a much more proprioception of where their low back is in space, because when you
Correct.
ask someone to maintain an arch, it's easier to maintain a flat back imprinted position because they can feel
Yeah.
the ground.
They can
When
feel
they
it.
when they can't feel anything there and it's just hanging out in space, people don't know where it is. They need to
Mm-mm.
be told. And we can tell them all we want, but if we're not there, what do? So it's important for them to be able to feel that at least at the beginning so they can establish what the rest of their body feels like going through that motion. So that hopefully down the road, if they're in a situation where they don't have something under their back, they're going to be able to remember where their body is in space and say, oh, yeah, here, their body will do it on autopilot. But at the beginning, especially, to have that proprioception, to feel that and feel, okay, I need to go up and over this, it can be a huge benefit.
And one of the things Brian and I talk about a lot, or I think we both have this experience. So Brian just mentioned if your client can't feel their back on something, they don't know where their back is, period. Like that's
Yep.
just true. So if somebody's doing footwork on the reformer or feet in straps on the reformer or like leg slides on the mat, and they don't have either their hands underneath their low back or something underneath their low back, they don't know that when those legs straighten and those hips extend, that low back pops up. And when the
Yep.
hips flex, the low back creeps down. Very few clients that I have ever worked with feel that without some tactile sensation going, either their own hands or a supported neutral or whatever. And one of the things we talk about a lot in terms of every low back client is finding out what position is most effective and comfortable for them is kind of our
Mhm.
first task. Is where does that lumbopelvic position want to be to minimize pain and discomfort and maximize function for that client?
Finding that is probably the number one thing that I do with all of my low back clients first session. And you and
Yep.
I have talked about it many, many times. It's okay. Do they feel more comfortable in a flexion or extension posture? Find out where they feel comfortable. Because if they do come in and they do have some discomfort and you put them in one position and it makes them worse, guess what? Put them in the other. Try that.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it sounds simplistic, but you'd be surprised how many people
Yes.
beat the dead horse and
Yeah.
just say, "Well, you need to be your back needs to
You
be
should
flat."
be here. You should be like this. Like, no.
E exactly. If the back doesn't wanna be there, it doesn't wanna be there. So find
Right.
out where they feel comfortable and put them there. Even if it looks strange to begin with, I find. Let's build up some strength in a position that they are safe, that they don't have pain or discomfort. So for a lot of the clients you and I were talking about before we started this today, I see probably 70% of my clients are more flexion biased because I see a lot of stenosis, disc degeneration, spondylolisthesis, those type of clients. So I see a lot of flexion based clients. So if I put them into extension, they are much more uncomfortable. So if they lie down with their legs straight, oh, it hurts their back. But if I flatten their back, it's, oh, okay, I feel so much more comfortable. Cool. All right. That's how I'm going to start them. Will I keep them there forever? I don't know, but that's where I need to start them and build up my strength from there. If it changes
Right.
down the road, that's different. That's fine. But that's where I start.
Right. And starting there also means, for me, for both Brian and I, training them to find that position of comfort, or, that zone of comfort. I'm going to use zone instead of position.
Yes.
Um, in seated, in supine, in standing,
Mhm.
in walking, in like whatever you're doing, so that it's not just on the mat, breathing, figuring it out, or on the reformer, supine, figuring it out. It's taking that into standing, taking that into a squat, taking that into sitting, taking that into all the things that they may be doing, so they understand how to support themselves as they go through their life. Because that's really where I find we make the biggest difference with low back people, is giving them
100%.
that one or two things that keeps their comfort level a little higher, their discomfort a little lower,
Yep.
and then having them really train that and train that awareness as they go through their day.
And if you think about it, that is that transition point where we're taking it to functionality. We're
Yeah,
taking it from
exactly.
rehabilitation to function. We said it earlier, proprioception. If they are lying down, they can feel their back on the ground. But as soon as you take them into quadruped, they do not know where their body is in space. They have to be
Right,
trained again.
right.
When you take them to seated, unless they're leaning back in the chair, they don't know where their back is in space. Take them to standing, same thing. So each position, a lot of times it's just, okay, here's how we want it to feel. Can you just maintain this? Great. You don't have any discomfort. Okay. Now rock side to side, forward and back. Can you maintain this? Now, can you lift a limb? Can you do the, small, easy
Challenging it.
movements, but
Yeah,
challenging that neutral? And I
yeah.
think that's something that a lot of younger instructors will
hmm
try and bypass. They get them stronger in supine. Their core is engaged, and they may get them into quadruped for opposite arm and leg raise or foot slide or whatever. But they want to get them into another position. They take them into seated, and they don't go first to challenging neutral. They want to do something. And sometimes we really need to say, okay, can they even establish that neutral and hold it and maintain it in a
hmm
seated position or in a standing position before we try and challenge it further? It's one thing to
Right.
challenge it with just a limb raise, just standing there, lifting an arm or lifting a leg. Yes, it's boring. I get it. But no, if I hand someone a weight, that changes the dynamic. If I ask them to do a squat, that changes the dynamic. All of it changes it. So it goes from static to dynamic. And if they can't maintain it statically, heaven help them trying to do it dynamically.
Right. This is step by step, right?
Yeah.
This is like, now one other thing I wanted to mention, just as we talk about this, is understand that you're not always going to get immediate feedback about which position is most comfortable for your client.
Yeah.
Right. Like you kind of start down a path, and then I see, do they feel better during the session? A lot of people feel better when they're moving. So they'll feel
Yeah.
better during a session, kind of no matter what, potentially anyway. Then I see, how are they the next day? How are they the day after that? How are they at the next session time you see them? So also understand, like I often find it takes about 3 times of seeing them to really go, okay, that was pretty good. That got us towards the right direction. Let's refine it a little bit.
Mhm.
That was better. Oh no, that wasn't better. Okay, we're gonna go, like, you just give yourself
Mhm.
that time to do that. The other thing too, Brian and I were talking about, is this can change through time.
Yes.
So when people are younger, again, things like disc injuries are often more common in younger people. And disc injuries often don't prefer flexion. They often prefer more of a neutral or extended position. But as clients age, arthritis comes into play,
Yep.
stenosis may come into play, and those osteoporosis is going back towards disc issues. But you just run into some other situations that may complicate the picture in terms of, oh, should I think about being a little more flexor? Should I think about being a little more extended? And that's why every client is an experiment, right? Every
Yep.
client, you got to kind of work on what works for them. You've got some
At
ideas in your
this
head.
moment,
You start at this moment. Exactly.
because I'm thinking of a client right now, and I've told you about her before. When we first started, she had a disc issue, disc herniation. Doctor wanted to do surgery. She said no, but she was going to go on a trip to the Galapagos in 8 weeks. And she said, I've got 8 weeks. Can you do anything to help me? And I said, okay, well, we know it's a disc issue. Taught her a bunch of extension stuff, Mackenzie, et cetera, yada, yada, but basically kept it all extension. Within 6 weeks, the pain was from like an 8 all the way down to like a 2. She went on the trip, had very little discomfort, occasional here or there, but nothing like she was before. Fantastic. She came back, stayed as a client for years. We kept her in that extension bias. Eventually, she said, for the last couple of months, my back has been a little more sore after, and now we're talking years have passed. She said, my
Right.
back has been bothering me. I said, oh, okay, but we're still doing all the things for that. So I immediately just flipped the switch. And I said, humor me. I know we've been doing this extension, these type of things. I didn't call it that. I said, we've been doing these things. I'm just going to change it and see how you feel. And if it makes it anything worse, you tell me. If it makes it feel better, tell me. We went more into a flexion, neutral to flexion. Suddenly, oh, wow, that feels so much better. Yeah. All right. She had crossed that 50-year-old stage. She had gotten, she'd gone into that. So I said, okay, chances are she probably has a little bit of arthritis, or she has a little bit of stenosis or disc degeneration. Something has happened. There's been changes to her spine that now she feels more comfortable flexed. We train her that way. She's had no back problems ever since. So again, it may change for the client, especially when you see them for long periods of time. Their
Yeah,
body does
really.
change.
And that's just always important for us to remember. It's like reassess, assess, and
Yeah.
reassess. And for some clients, like I had clients too for like 16 years. At some point, honestly, you both become blind to each other because
Oh, yeah.
you've seen them every Wednesday at 10 since you were 15 years younger than you are today. And
Yep.
at that point, neither of you are really listening, I don't think, very well to each other anymore, or seeing each other very clearly. But that's a good reminder. It's like, oh, this is starting to bother me. Like, oh, that's interesting. Let's, a reminder, right? Change it up. Things change,
Yeah.
and just trying to stay aware of that. Especially any of you out there who've been in practice for a long time, it's interesting to have clients for that long because you
Well, just
really,
ask yourself, has your
yeah,
body changed in the last 10
yeah,
years?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I was telling you, first time I took a mat class, my body was loving extension, and there was so much flexion when I did my mat instruction class. I was in more pain after that weekend than I was going into it because we were doing all the exercises. And I'm thinking, wow, my body just doesn't like flexion. But guess what? That was 15 years ago. Today, my body likes a lot more flexion. I'm 15 years older. And we have to ask ourselves, if that's our bodies, well, guess what? Our clients are the exact same way.
yeah,
And as they begin to heal and as they begin to get stronger, their bodies may change, and they may go from being an extension to wanting to be more into a traditional neutral spine. They may soften that extension somewhat as their core becomes stronger. They're no longer hanging on just the discs. Now they've got a lot more support. Their fascial suit has now molded to them, and they've gotten more support. So now they can maybe maintain closer to neutral spine. Things are going to change. If you
yes,
see
and let
someone
and
long
let them
enough,
change.
they're,
Stay open.
and let them, yes, and
Yeah,
stay up with it,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and that's really important. That's why I love the fact that you mentioned it. Reassess, take a look. And if it's been a while, I highly, highly recommend, if you're going on vacation, have them work with someone else for a session or two and
Right,
get
because
that
trust
person's
me, they'll
opinion.
and well, plus they will hear things that you may have said. This we've all had this experience many times, right? That you've said
Yeah.
100 times. They will
They'll
they'll
say
hear
once
it
and they get
from
it.
that person, right? Right. I mean, how many times? I mean, Brian and I both said this, but how many times have you come back from vacation? You've seen this client, you've been seeing them for 5 years. They saw a new teacher for 2 weeks. Like, they gave me the best cue, and they tell you, and you're like, I think I've
Mhm.
said that to you at least 17,000 times in the last 5 years. But
Yep.
when they're ready, they're ready. When their ears are open and when they can hear it, and sometimes a new voice is what makes that difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having another person's eyes on someone. I remember the first time it happened in our practice, we sort of, one person would work with one instructor. And that's the way they wanted it. The clients like one person, and hey,
Yeah,
it was working for us. Great. I went out of town and I was going out to teach. So I was going to be gone for a while. And I said, look, you really should work with so and so. And they fought it, but they said, okay, fine, I'll do it for a few sessions. Well, when I came back, they said, oh no, the session went great. Good. I talked to my employee and she said, "Oh yeah, it was good. Did you notice this, this, and this?" And I had become very myopic and blind to
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
went, "Oh, I didn't see that," because I've been working with them for so long that it opened my eyes. So now when I work with them, I'm making different decisions. I'm doing other
Yes.
exercises that
Yeah.
maybe aren't the same rule book that we've been following. And suddenly the client says, "Oh, these are new exercises. Oh, yeah. Oh, you must have learned something when you were away." And I'm thinking, well, maybe not. I just needed to be woken up a little bit and maybe shown, "Oh, did you notice this? Did you notice that? Did you see her knee? Oh, I wasn't focused on her knee. I was focused on her spine because that's what I've been
Right.
focused on for the last 5 years."
Yeah,
Ah,
exactly.
yeah.
It's
So
classic.
a new set of eyes can make a huge difference. And I actually say that to
Absolutely.
everybody that I assess. I say, you're going to
Yeah.
work with the whole staff.
Good.
You'll have a primary, but you're going to work with all of us because the more eyes that are on you, the more we're going to see.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
So
really,
definitely.
that's so critical.
And over time, you're going to see that, and their spines are going to change, and their pelvic positioning is going to change. And suddenly they're going to move differently, and you're going to see that they're going to have better support. And maybe their SI joints, which once were holding on for dear life and they weren't moving at all, and everything was rigid, suddenly there's more malleability and they're able to move. And now you can see, oh, they're walking better. They're getting into hip extension better. They're doing this better. And their spine is now able to move in a way that it wasn't before. They're going to feel comfortable in other spinal positions.
And this brings us to the next key piece that I find, and I think you've mentioned it in both the things you've talked about in this last little chunk, is one of the challenges that we certainly had at the hospital was working with clients in serious amounts of discomfort at different times. And as a teacher, it's easy to get scared. It's easy to go, oh,
Mm,
we're just going to like keep everything small, keep you in this range. But what I found was it was easy to keep them in that limited, modified versions of things longer than was necessary. And that I find
mhm.
is one of the hardest things actually when working with clients in pain is knowing when and how to progress.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to cause more pain. You don't want to flare them up. Sometimes you will. That happens. So just deal with
Mhm.
it. But you don't want to if you can help it. But you do want to keep making progress.
Yeah.
I'm sure Brian's had this too. I've had so many clients, low back clients, who've come to me after seeing a doctor, seeing some PTs, maybe seeing a chiropractor, and they've got their little home program. They've got 6 or 8 exercises in their home program, which has actually maybe been serving them pretty well. But
Mhm.
they've been doing those same 8 exercises for 2 years.
Yep.
Okay. Nothing remains effective for that long.
No.
It just really doesn't. Like they've got that down. That's good maintenance for them. But if you want to make progress, you've got to keep gently challenging that position or challenging different ranges of motion or challenging different loads. You've got to just take those next steps.
Yep.
And there's one teacher, Diana Harold, who was one of my major teachers in life. And she just had the best way to do it. She would just add one thing.
Mhm.
Oh, we're going to try this week. And she would just add one thing. And then she'd see how they reacted the next session. They'd add it again. The next session, add it again. Okay, that went well. We're going to add one more thing. She was
Mhm.
really good about dosing those changes out. So you have a good foundation that you know is working, isn't causing too many flare-ups, is pretty solid. Then you add the one thing. And maybe it's like, let's say, step downs on the chair, standing single leg pumps on the chair, which is hard. It's reciprocal leg motion, it's balance. There's a lot of things happen. There's force coming through. A lot of things are going to like torque the pelvis and torque the spine. And she would just come over and say, okay, hang on to the handles or hang on to the wall or whatever, and just do this on this leg and do this on this leg. And that's all she would do to see how they went. Through 2 3 weeks, 2 3 4 sessions later, okay, that went well. Let's take the next step. And I think when you're working with clients, don't forget to progress. Their
Yes.
fear will often stop you, and your fear can stop you as well. But it's important to keep moving them forward as much and as carefully as you can.
I think having the bigger picture in mind is also very important. For me,
Yeah.
it's always, okay, I want to get them off the table. I want to get them into functional exercise. I want to get them into being able to do more. rather than, like you said, doing the same 10 exercises that are going to keep me relatively pain-free. And I'm going to be locked in my little box and never get out of it. And for me, it's no. The question is always, when will I be ready to ...
Right.
So is it a squat? Okay. Can you sit down? That's a negative squat. All right. And sometimes people have to be explained that. They say, oh yeah, I can sit in a chair. Perfect. Can you get up without pain? Can you do this? And so it's about progression. So I'm always trying to figure out, what is the next progression? Where is the next step going to be? And the way you described it is perfect. I always think of it, because we did that in science, in that you only want to change one variable at a time.
Right. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I wouldn't throw 2 exercises, because if they end up in pain, well, which one was it? I don't know. Could have been both, could have been one, could have been the other. But if I had one and so they get flared up, all right, they're not ready for that. I have a great example happened 2 weeks ago. I had a client do something that was very simple. They had been doing side walking with a band around their knees for a hip abduction. Great. I have a multi-hip machine. I thought, just for fun, we'll do standing side leg kick out to the side. No problem. Well, guess what? Sometimes that does flare up someone. If they have an overactive QL, that can affect that. Guess what? It did. That was the only thing I added differently. So I knew exactly what it was. So I said, all
Right.
right, that
Exactly.
didn't work for you. And it was only angry for a day or so, but I knew, okay, that's not appropriate today.
Right.
No problem. I do have other exercises that we've been doing. We'll just go back to those. And as you get stronger, but it also clued me in as an assessment. Oh, I need to strengthen that aspect as well, to make sure she can handle, standing side leg kick if I want to do that again. So again,
Right.
it was just an assessment, but adding that one thing told me, okay, not ready. Okay, that's fine. Go back to what was working, and then we can build on from there again.
But it showed you what wasn't working. It shows you where she'd gotten to, where the next step was. It also helps to illuminate what needs to work to make that happen. Right? We talked
Yeah.
about this last time, I think, or it's one of those times, talking about how you make a program, right? And it's like, okay, so now you've identified this worked, which is similar, right? Sidestepping with a band, but this bigger range of motion, maybe resistance is in a little different place. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? And then you start to say, okay, refine that, figure that out, and then move up towards it, right? So every time you do go too far, it teaches you something about where you need to go, and maybe what the steps are to get there, which is, I think, a really important piece of that.
And it's peeling the onion. It's a different
Yes.
layer that
Yeah.
maybe hadn't been talking before. I mean, how many times have you had someone come in for their knee, and then their knee is feeling better? Everything's getting so much stronger with their knee, and their back begins to hurt. And then they're like, but my back didn't hurt. You know what? It was a weak link in the chain. It just
Right.
wasn't the weakest when I met you. We've
Exactly.
strengthened this other
Exactly.
one.
But
So
this one's
now
better. So now it's like, okay, somebody
the
else is
next one
talking.
is exactly. And once you explain that, they say, oh, and I said, it's like whack-a-mole. You hit one, something else pops up. Okay, we're going to deal with that now. There may be something else. Let's hope they all stay down, but something else may rear its ugly head. You got to whack that one down too. And as we get older, unfortunately, more things pop up, as time goes on. But sometimes that's what we have to sort of do. And it's just tweaking the programming and making sure that we are progressing, that we are getting better, and that we're able to get them into a much more, as I said, dynamic state. Because again, a lot of what we teach is a lot of stationary and a lot of static work, especially on the reformer, on the table, where their core is can be stationary if that's what you choose to put them in that box. And you can move everything around it. But as soon as you get them standing, or get them into a lunge position, or get them into a squat, or picking up a child, or picking up the dog poop, I mean, whatever it is, all of that can lead to, oh, okay, we need to get them functional to do all of those things. Or this time of year, they're going to be gardening fairly soon. Okay, all that kind of stuff, or shoveling snow in the next 6 months. Getting them to those activities that are coming up. And we need to strengthen that to get them dynamic. So we need to take a look at what we need to do in our facilities to take them from that position of, okay, here's the box. Now let's expand the box, make it bigger.
And folks in there, so Brian mentioned a lot of functional activity. Brian, you have a new puppy, don't you?
Yeah, that's why I was. I
I
was
was
gonna
like,
say that was the first thing out of my
Brian has
mouth,
a
and I
new
was like, I
puppy.
wonder why.
This is familiar with at the moment.
Yep.
Oh, but with that in mind, keeping in mind what their goals are, what they need to do, right? Like, and really making sure that you're also focusing their skill building on what they think is important. That'll always make their motivation higher. That'll always make it much easier for you to
Mhm.
sell the next set of exercises or the next set of sessions, right? If they know, okay, I'm making progress towards, whatever my goals are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that. So thinking about this, right? One other little piece that I wanted to add here is we've talked about, again, neutral flexion versus extension bias, that being the foundation of what we do. One thing I like to play with here too is I talked a little bit to functional stuff, is walking and talking about how,
Yeah.
like teaching a client how to actually move with a different posture than they're used to. Because remember, walking is hardwired from a very early age,
Mhm.
and that's just the nature of walking. So helping people change that to be more comfortable can take some time. When I was teaching at St. Francis Hospital in San Francisco, I lived in the East Bay, so I lived in Oakland. I would take BART over, and then I would walk up the hill to the hospital. It was like a 15-minute walk, and it was great because I would use that walk to play with different walks
Mm.
because it was about, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 blocks, something like that. So I would experiment with being more turned out, being more turned in, playing with my pelvic position. And that's a really nice way, if your client's willing and if they tend to walk a bit, to play with things like that. One of the things, and this comes up an awful lot with stenosis, and Brian can speak about it more than I can really, but is oftentimes you have to teach clients with stenosis to walk with a slight posterior tilt. So
Mhm.
think about like an old man walk, like a stereotypical kind of round backed, not very much hip extension walk. A lot of times that's for pain control because they don't want to move their hips or their low back into extension.
Yep.
And so teaching people to actually walk with that gait can really prolong how long they can walk, which could be good for the rest of them. Anyway, Brian, would you address that a little bit? Because I think it's something I know you work with, and it's an important thing to
It
add.
is. It is because again, it goes to that dynamic movement. So when they do need to stay in that posterior tilt for stenosis, spondylolisthesis, any of that sort of thing, or degeneration, I usually will say, I want you to shorten your stride just a little bit and really think about tucking that tailbone under. And I always sort of give them the visual. I pull my belt up to my chest and I say, the guy and we all know this guy, and when they
Yeah,
tucked under like that, they all laugh. And I say, now think about that when you're walking. You don't have to look like that. But
right.
if walking with just that slight pelvic tilt where you're tucked under, it's going to shorten your stride. Your leg's not going to go as far back behind you as it did before. But if we can do that and you're out of pain, is it worth walking like that? And you'd be surprised how everybody says, absolutely. If they can walk now a mile with no pain instead of half a block, it changes everything.
Yeah,
And for extension, the same thing. What I'll tell those people is lengthen your stride.
yeah.
I want you to take that leg behind you a little further and allow that, so long as they're not in an acute low back situation, because sometimes they may have some spasms going on and that can affect that. So if they're
Right.
not having spasms, then I'll say lengthen your stride a little bit, push off with your big toe a little bit. It gets their glutes fiery. It puts them into a little bit of extension. And believe it or not, they say, oh, wow, that just feels more comfortable.
Hmm.
So, and
Yeah.
these are small things. And I'm going to reiterate that when it comes to walking, you don't want to you don't want to change it too much to start with. You want to make a
Hmm.
small change at a time because you can really exacerbate the condition and make it a whole lot worse if you try and change everything about their gait. Gait is hardwired in, man. And if you've worked with anybody who has a limp or who has walked a certain way for a long period of time, it is hardwired. So it's like, okay, for a short period of time, for the next 10 steps, you're going to focus on just push through your big toe. I don't even
Yeah.
say lengthen your stride, push through your big toe. It naturally lengthens their stride. And they'll say, oh, okay, sure. Just for 10 steps, then let it go. Set your watch. 5
Yep. And I
minutes,
do. Yeah.
do it
I
again.
do. I do 10 steps, or I do time, or I do blocks,
Yeah.
or I do driveways, like depending on,
Driveways,
where they're walking. It's like
foam
if you've
pole.
got certain things, like I go for 3 houses, you're going to walk like this, and then you're going to forget
Yep.
about it, and
Yep.
literally forget about it.
Yep. Let it
Like,
go.
don't think about it again. And then, another 10 houses, do it for 3 more houses, something like
Yep.
that. Because that's really like you've got two things.
It's
One, to
fixed.
change it, you want to focus on it.
Yep.
Right? You really like you have to focus on it, and you can't really focus on it for longer than oftentimes a short period of time, like 3 houses, or quarter block or something like that. So just give them what they can, like really focus and then really forget, and then
Yep.
really focus and then really forget. And that's, I find, that the most effective way to comfortably change something that's that hardwired in.
Yeah. And that's really the key, to do something in small segments and give them one thing to think about, and that's it. So I will tell my person who needs to be in posterior tilt, just tuck your tailbone under just a little bit for the next 3 houses, for the next 2 driveways, whatever it is, depending on how far they're going to walk. Now, for some of
Yeah.
these people, they can't walk more than half a block without pain. So it's like, okay,
Right.
for a quarter of this walk, I want you to start out like this and see how it feels. And then when you're halfway down the road, do it for 10 more steps. Then do it for 10
Exactly.
more steps. I'm lucky here, right outside my wall behind me is a long hallway. It's got to be, almost 50 meters long. And we're the only people down here besides the maintenance crew. So it's guess what? We use the hallway all the time. So it's easy for us to begin to train that,
Yeah.
but if you take
You
your
have this
client,
distance.
yeah, if you can, take them outside, get them to walk, then get them to do things like stairs.
Uh-huh.
East Coast. I mean, West Coast, you guys don't have as many stairs, but here on the East Coast, oh my gosh, every house has steps. So guess what? They have to learn these things. So by just getting them to think about putting them in that correct position, tucking the tailbone under a little bit. I preface that a little bit, or stick your butt out a little bit. It makes a big difference. And then you can always adjust it and make it more down the road, but you need to start somewhere, and you don't want to make it too much. And I'm going to tell the story. I've said it before. I had a client who read in an article somewhere about, squeezing his butt when he walked because that's going
Right.
to take care of his back pain.
Yeah.
And he did that for like an entire 5-mile walk. I'm not kidding. Every step. And he's OCD. He is one of those people that he just squeezed for the whole time. His back was inflamed for months.
Yes.
So I tell that story
Yeah.
to every client that I say this to. I say, when
Uh-huh.
I say for 10 steps, I mean 10 steps.
Mean 10 steps. I don't
That's
mean
it.
10 and then another 10 and then another 10. I mean 10. Stop.
Yep.
Yeah, if you got your type A's, and Brian, you're in Washington, D.C., so you have
We
a
got a
lot of
few.
type A's out there. Yes. And I was in the Bay Area, and I had a lot of type A's too. Like, you got to be very explicit. 5 minutes, set your clock, and then stop, or,
Yes.
whatever you're going to do.
Yeah.
So I think this, again, we've talked a bit about just playing with these biases, working with them in different positions.
Yep.
Understand that neutral is a zone, it's not a position. And
That's
then how
huge.
do you take that into functional movement? How do you take that into functional movement that does their goals? How do you progress them?
Mhm.
I think this is, I don't know, I've enjoyed this conversation. I think we've talked to a lot of really important nuances
Mhm.
about this difficult topic. And this is like, I'm thinking of the title for this event, and I think it's going to be neutral spine question mark. It depends.
Yeah. I like that.
Because really it is so individual, and should be. Yeah,
Mhm.
that really has to be customized for every client.
And in just preparing for this coming weekend and for our low back stuff, you and I have been preparing for the last couple of weeks. This is a lot of what we've been talking about when we talk to each
Yeah.
other. It's okay. What do we want to focus on through this? What do we want to focus on through that? So, yeah, this is a nice sort of introduction for what we're going to be covering this weekend, but we're going to have a lot more practical application for it,
Right. Absolutely.
because we can get into, okay, what does it mean to be an extension? And how do we adjust for that on the reformer? How do we adjust
Right.
for that on the Cadillac? How do we adjust for that seated, standing, all of these positions? So this gives us an idea of what we're going to be covering. And for everybody who's going to be joining us this weekend, I can't wait to meet you. I can't wait to see you. We're going to have so much fun, and we're going to play with all of these. So hopefully you guys have listened to this, and you're going to have questions, And hopefully we're going to have all the answers, or a number of the answers.
Some answers.
Some of them,
some answers,
one or two,
Brian.
maybe occasionally. maybe an answer or two, maybe. But yeah, and we'll be able to walk you through it and hopefully, you know, enhance. I think you and I are always trying to just enhance what you currently know, and maybe answer a few questions that you might have, but also help you to think, so that when the next client comes with something, you'll have a little bit more of an understanding of, oh, here's the direction I need to go. So maybe provide a little bit of a roadmap. So I think we're going to be doing that a little bit this weekend.
Exactly. Helping you find your direction.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. And if you are interested in learning more about the thing, again, there's less than a week left. All the stuff is in the show notes. BlueMoonPilates.com is where you can go if you want more information. Okay, so do us a favor as well. Hit that like and subscribe button. About 33% of you are subscribed to this. So I highly, highly ask that you hit the subscribe button. We really, really appreciate it, because for every subscriber we get, it helps us get out there to more and more people. So the algorithms change and we're able to get out there a little bit more. So more people hopefully can hear us and we can help more people out. So we really appreciate that. So hit that like and subscribe button, comment, share, do all of that. We really appreciate it. On Instagram, we're Moving Convos, and movingconvos@gmail.com is the best way to get in touch with us. So for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll see you all next week.
Nice.